It was a cold November night, and the Santiago Bernabéu stadium was filled with fervor. Real Madrid were facing a fearsome opponent in the UEFA Champions League, and the atmosphere was so electric you could cut it with a knife. Fans from all over the world were tuned into the match, especially as Portuguese star Cristiano Ronaldo was playing at his home ground, the Bernabéu. The night promised to be one that would go down in football history. Cristiano, with his determined gaze and his usual confidence, was ready to do what he did best: leave his mark on the pitch. Despite being a legendary player, he always found ways to surprise the world. That night, something extraordinary was about to happen, but not even he knew what was in store for him. The first half was intense. Real Madrid played hard, dominating possession. However, the opposition, clever and well prepared, fiercely resisted every attack. The minutes ticked by, and although Ronaldo had had a couple of attempts, the opposing goal seemed harder to reach than ever. The crowd, although excited, was beginning to get restless. Something was missing, something that only Ronaldo could deliver. His presence, his magic, was about to become legendary once again. The 45th minute was fast approaching. Real Madrid were pressing in the last attack of the first half, looking for a goal that would give them the lead. Suddenly, a precise pass from Luka Modric landed at the feet of Cristiano Ronaldo, who was standing on the edge of the opponent's box. All eyes in the stadium were on him. As if it were all part of a perfectly rehearsed choreography, Ronaldo was preparing to shoot. But at the last second, something strange happened. The ball, seemingly harmless, seemed to take an unusual direction, as if an invisible wind had deflected it. Cristiano, with almost mystical precision, adjusted his body to correct his shot, and instantly the ball changed course, but in such a peculiar way that it left everyone in the stadium perplexed. The shot, which in theory would have been a spectacular goal, ended up grazing the crossbar and flying towards the opponent's field, leaving a trail of surprise in the air. The rival players looked at the ball in disbelief, while Ronaldo, confused by the strange turn of events, stared at the ball with a mixture of astonishment and frustration. However, this strange event would not be the only one of the night. The story of that play would become even more intriguing. Beyond the inexplicable trajectory of the ball, something else was happening in that match, something that would completely change the perception of Cristiano Ronaldo and his connection with football. The second half began with an even more emotional atmosphere. The fans at the Bernabéu continued to hold their breath, waiting to see their idol do what he did best: score an impressive goal. Cristiano Ronaldo, though baffled by the unexpected turn of his earlier shot, did not let it discourage him. His focus was unwavering as always. Despite the strangeness of the play, he was determined to shine on a night that felt like it was written in the stars. As the match progressed, the opposition began to show signs of wear and tear. Real Madrid, led by Ronaldo, continued to dominate the game, and the Portuguese's chance for redemption was not long in coming. In the 70th minute, the opposition made a fatal mistake by losing possession in midfield. Modric, who had been the architect of many plays during the match, intercepted the ball and, with impeccable vision, flicked it towards Ronaldo. It was a golden opportunity. Cristiano controlled the ball with his trademark precise touch as his teammates moved to support him. The stadium was filled with cheers and applause, the atmosphere charged with adrenaline. Ronaldo, with his goal-scoring instinct, saw the gap in the defense and decided to take advantage of it. But as he was about to launch his shot, a strange glow began to envelop the ball. The same ball that had played a trick on him minutes before now seemed to have a life of its own. As if fate wanted to make sure Ronaldo didn't give up, the ball, just like in the previous play, inexplicably veered off its path. Suddenly, the ball, instead of being a simple shot straight at goal, seemed to soar into the sky, spinning with a speed that surprised even the opposing defenders. The opposing goalkeeper, a player of great renown, lunged to stop what he thought would be an easy shot. But something about the ball's trajectory made him hesitate. As the ball rose, the curve and speed were impossible to predict. Opposing players looked on in amazement, and fans stood up in shock from their seats, staring at the ball with wide eyes. At that moment, Cristiano Ronaldo, as if already accustomed to these extraordinary phenomena, watched the trajectory of the ball with imperturbable calm. It was not the first time he had encountered the unusual in football. With a confident smile, he simply waited. The ball, as if guided by an invisible force, began to descend towards the goal, and the goalkeeper, who was already on the ground after his failed attempt, could not react in time. The stadium erupted in a deafening roar. The ball entered the net with an almost magical smoothness. But the most shocking of all was what happened next. The image of the goal, immortalized by the cameras, revealed something that no one expected. The ball had not touched the ground or bounced. It had disappeared into the air, as if it had completely dematerialized. The players, the referees, and the spectators stood watching, bewildered. The goal was valid, but no one could understand how it had happened. The play was something that could only be explained as an inexplicable phenomenon, as if football itself had made a pact with Cristiano Ronaldo that night. Something bigger than just the game was happening, something that only a player of his caliber could understand. And as the match continued, the feeling that fate was smiling on Ronaldo could not be ignored. The match continued, but the atmosphere at the Bernabeu was completely different. The fans were no longer just celebrating the goal, but a strange sense of wonder took over the stadium. Ronaldo's goal had been unusual, even for him. The ball, seemingly guided by an external force, had left everyone speechless. But what happened next, in the minutes that followed, would prove that what had happened was no mere coincidence. In the next 10 minutes, Real Madrid launched themselves into the attack with more force than ever. Cristiano, now more focused than ever, ran around the field with a fire in his eyes, driven by an energy that seemed to be beyond human. Something had changed in him. The goal he had scored, so peculiar in its execution, had transformed him. He was playing with an intensity that seemed superhuman, as if he had connected with an unknown force. At 80 minutes, as the match neared its end, Real Madrid were ahead on the scoreboard by 2-1. But their opponents were not willing to give up. They knew that if they did not score soon, they would lose the opportunity to advance in the competition. The ball came back to the feet of Ronaldo, who was in his half of the field. He was observing, as always, the panorama, evaluating his options. But what no one expected happened. Suddenly, a dark and mysterious cloud appeared over the field, just above the opponent's goal. It was an unusual meteorological phenomenon, which seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The players of both teams stopped momentarily, looking at the strange apparition in the sky. Ronaldo, however, did not take his eyes off the ball. The cloud began to slowly rotate, creating a kind of vortex in the air. Some of the fans began to murmur amongst themselves, while the television commentators tried to give a logical explanation to what they were seeing. It was then that the ball, which Cristiano had launched into the air on a long pass, began to follow a similar trajectory to the one it had taken for his first goal. Despite the wind blowing in the opposite direction, the ball seemed to defy the laws of physics. It soared above the opposing players, as if it were being carried by an invisible hand. The opposing goalkeeper, who had begun to step forward to intercept the ball, stood still, watching in amazement. The stadium was completely silent as the ball headed straight for the goal. The opposing players tried to react, but they could do nothing. The ball, just as before, fell with extraordinary precision and entered the net without touching the ground or deviating from its trajectory. The fans at the Bernabeu could not believe their eyes. It was as if Ronaldo was controlling the wind, the weather, and even fate. The crowd erupted in a deafening roar, and disbelief turned to pure celebration. The goal, while impressive, was just the tip of the iceberg. Something bigger than football was happening, and everyone present knew it. Cristiano Ronaldo, standing in front of the goal, smiled with an eerie calm. Although his face showed satisfaction, there was something in his gaze that reflected the realization that what he had just done was something far beyond a simple goal. The media began to speculate. Was it magic, divine intervention, or had Ronaldo perhaps reached such a high level of skill that he could now control the referee? Equally surprised, validated the goal without question. At that point, Real Madrid already had a 3-1 lead, and the feeling that something epic was happening could not be ignored. The match continued, but the atmosphere at the Bernabeu had changed completely. The fans were no longer just watching football. They were witnessing something almost supernatural. The atmosphere was as tense as it was fascinating, as if the entire stadium was waiting for what Cristiano Ronaldo might do next. The opposing players, although bewildered by what they had just witnessed, tried to stay focused, but something in the air prevented them from thinking clearly. The opposing team's coach, seeing Ronaldo's incredible form and the inexplicable energy that seemed to surround him, began to doubt his strategy. The plays of the Real Madrid players, especially Cristiano's, flowed with perfect coordination, as if football itself was cooperating with them. Every pass, every dribble, every movement seemed to be guided by an invisible force. It was clear that Ronaldo was in another dimension, where his connection with the game went beyond the physical. After 85 minutes, with the score 3-1 in favor of Real Madrid, the opposition began to make changes, desperately looking for an opportunity to reduce the lead. But on the pitch, all eyes were following Ronaldo, as if he were the center of everything that was happening. The ball returned to the feet of the Portuguese, who without hesitation made a feint that left the opposing defender totally disoriented. But the strangest thing of all happened the instant he made the pass. Suddenly, the ball began to spin in a way that seemed unnatural. Instead of falling towards the feet of the teammate to whom the pass was intended, the ball began to slowly rise, ascending towards the sky. As if it were following the same law that had governed his first and second goals, the ball again took a direction that was impossible to predict. But this time, he didn't head for the goal, but instead approached the touchline, as if someone was manipulating space and time. The opposing team's players stared in amazement, while the fans rose from their seats in anticipation. Ronaldo's teammates, equally shocked, stared at the ball in amazement. However, at the last second, before the ball hit the ground, a bright flash appeared around it. The ball, as if it were a floating object, changed course and returned towards the center of the pitch, where a teammate of Cristiano, Karim Benzema, was ready to receive it. Benzema, with an incredulous smile, prepared to finish. But before he could make contact with the ball, something even more astonishing happened. The ball momentarily dematerialized, only to reappear right in front of the opposition's area. The referee and the players, totally baffled, could not understand what had happened. For everyone, it was as if the ball was guided by a force from outside this world, a force that only Cristiano Ronaldo could understand. Benzema, without wasting any time, finished impeccably, scoring the fourth goal for Real Madrid. But for a moment, not even that goal caused the same euphoria. Everyone in the stadium was still looking at the field, searching for answers to what they had just seen. The match, now almost won, was not just a victory on the scoreboard, but the beginning of a mystery that could never be fully solved. The players, like the fans, could not stop talking about the phenomenon that had just occurred. The television cameras focused on Ronaldo, who, with an almost supernatural calm, observed the result of what only he seemed to understand. There was something in his gaze, something that indicated that he knew that night, football was not just a sport. It was a manifestation of something much bigger. The match ended in a resounding victory for Real Madrid. But the real victory was in the air, in that enigma that could not be explained. Was it a coincidence? A trick of fate? The only thing that is clear is that for Cristiano Ronaldo, that night football became something that could not be replicated by any other player in history. After the match, the world press exploded with speculation about what had just happened at the Bernabeu. Headlines came one after another, all trying to explain the inexplicable phenomena surrounding Ronaldo's play that night. Some spoke of a pact with fate. Others said he was being guided by a higher power. However, not even the most rational explanations could capture the true essence of what happened. What happened that night with Cristiano Ronaldo was not something that could be explained by logic alone. It was something that escaped any attempt at understanding. While meanwhile, in the locker room, Ronaldo was silent, staring at the floor. His teammates, still amazed by what they had experienced, approached him, applauding, hugging him, but Cristiano remained pensive. Something inside him told him that night he had reached a level of connection with football that went beyond any personal achievement. He knew that what he had experienced was not just a series of goals or extraordinary plays, but an experience that transcended the physical. He had been part of something bigger, something mysterious. Ronaldo, with his characteristic silence, stood up to leave the locker room. At that moment, the camera lights surrounded him, and although many expected to see his usual triumphant smile, this time his expression was different. He looked around at the journalists and then, with a discreet smile, said, "Football has its own magic. That night, I could feel it." And with those words he left everyone even more perplexed. It wasn't just about his skill, but about something deeper, something that was at the very core of the game. People, however, did not forget what happened that night. In the weeks and months that followed, the video of those goals and those inexplicable moments went viral. Fans, even rivals, couldn't help but be drawn to the magic of that night. Every time someone mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo's name, they were reminded of that historic day, that day that made it clear that, for him, football was not just a sport, but a connection to something beyond logic. Years later, when people talked about the greatest footballers in history, Cristiano Ronaldo's name was always mentioned with respect. But those who had witnessed that night knew that what happened at the Bernabeu on that occasion was not just a display of his skill. There was something mystical about that play, something that gave him a unique place in football history. No one else had ever played a game like the one that night, and perhaps they never would again. Cristiano Ronaldo, in the end, had left an indelible mark on football, not just as an exceptional player, but as someone capable of making the impossible feel possible. Someone who, for a brief moment, touched the very magic of the sport.